I'm Chelsea, 35, and I've built a successful career in engineering despite my path being harder than necessary. When I received my MIT acceptance letter in high school, I was ecstatic. My academic dreams were finally within reach. Then came the devastating conversation with my parents claiming they couldn't financially support my education. Just 2 weeks later, I discovered they'd given my brother $12,000 to launch his DJ career. Years later, when they called asking me to pay their mortgage, I said no. It wasn't spite, it was self-respect. If you're watching this, let me know where you're from in the comments. Hit that like and subscribe button if family financial favoritism resonates with you. My fascination with science and engineering began when I was 7 years old. I still remember the Christmas morning when my grandmother gave me my first chemistry set. While other kids got dolls and video games, she recognized something in me that my parents never quite seemed to understand. My grandmother watched as I meticulously followed each experiment, my eyes lighting up with each chemical reaction. "This girl is going to change the world someday," she told my parents. They smiled politely, but I could tell they didn't share her enthusiasm. Not completely. By elementary school, I was building simple circuits and taking apart household appliances to understand how they worked. My father would get frustrated when he found the toaster disassembled, but my grandmother would defend me. "Let the girl learn," she'd say. "How else will she figure things out?" The science fairs became my playground. In fourth grade, I created a solar-powered water purifier that caught the attention of the district superintendent. In fifth grade, my project on sustainable energy won first place at the regional competition. Each blue ribbon and certificate was carefully collected in a special folder I kept under my bed. I'd look at them sometimes when I felt uncertain, using them as proof that my dreams weren't too big. My teachers quickly became my mentors. Mr. Harrington, my seventh grade science teacher, would stay after school to help me with experiments that went beyond the curriculum. He introduced me to concepts most students wouldn't encounter until college. "Chelsea, you have a gift," he told me one afternoon as we successfully completed a complex chemical analysis. "Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." At home, things were different. My mother was a nurse working long shifts, and my father was an accountant who valued practicality above all else. They were proud of my accomplishments in a distant sort of way, displaying my awards on the refrigerator, but rarely asking about what I was learning or working on. "Book smarts will only get you so far," my father would say. "We need to make sure you have practical life skills." This usually translated to me helping with household chores while my younger brother Aaron was allowed to pursue his hobbies. Aaron struggled in school, barely maintaining a C average, yet my parents devoted enormous attention to nurturing his interests, which changed every few months from skateboarding to video game designing to music production. "Aaron needs extra support," my mother would explain when I questioned the disparity. "You're naturally gifted. You'll be fine no matter what." In high school, my academic achievements reached new heights. I took every advanced placement class available, maintained a perfect GPA, and still found time to work part-time at the local library to save for college. I became captain of the robotics team, leading us to the state championship, where we competed against private schools with vastly more resources. The imbalance at home became more pronounced. While I was staying up until midnight finishing calculus problems and physics projects, my parents were driving Aaron to music lessons and buying him expensive equipment for each new passion. When I asked for funds for a special science camp one summer, my parents explained they couldn't afford it. That same month, they bought Aaron a $1,500 guitar he abandoned 3 months later. Despite the lack of support at home, I continued pushing forward. By junior year, I had developed a water filtration system that used locally available materials to provide clean drinking water in resource-limited environments. This project won national recognition and caught the attention of several university recruiters. The turning point came during the National Science Olympiad in my senior year. Representatives from MIT were in attendance judging projects and scouting talent. When they came to my booth, I nervously explained my research methodology and findings. "This is graduate-level work," one judge remarked, examining my design specifications. "Have you considered applying to MIT?" I had considered it, of course, but had always thought of it as an impossible dream. The judge gave me his card and encouraged me to apply for early decision. That night, I called my grandmother, voice trembling with excitement. They think I have what it takes, Grandma, I whispered, afraid to say it too loudly in case it wasn't real. Of course you do, she replied with the unwavering confidence she had always shown in me. I've known that since you were 7. The application process was intense. I spent countless hours perfecting my personal statement, gathering recommendation letters, and preparing for interviews. My guidance counselor, Ms. Fernandez, helped me navigate the complex application requirements, often staying late to review my materials. This is one of the strongest applications I've ever seen, she assured me. MIT would be lucky to have you. When I told my parents about applying, they exchanged concerned glances. MIT is very expensive, my father said. You should apply to state schools too. I will, I promised. But this is my dream. As I waited for the decision, I allowed myself to imagine walking through the prestigious halls of MIT, collaborating with brilliant professors and peers, making discoveries that could change lives. For the first time in a long time, I felt like my academic passion wasn't just tolerated, but might actually be celebrated. The dream seemed tantalizingly close within reach if I just worked hard enough. Little did I know that the greatest barrier to my future wouldn't be academic ability or even college readiness, but something I never expected from the people who were supposed to support me most. The day my MIT acceptance letter arrived, I checked the mail before anyone else got home. The thick envelope trembled in my hands as I stared at the prestigious return address. I knew thick envelopes were good news. Thin ones meant rejection. I stood in the driveway for several minutes, heart pounding, before finally gathering the courage to open it. Dear Chelsea, the letter began. We are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted into the Massachusetts Institute of Technology class of 2010. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. All those late nights studying all those extra projects, all the times I pushed myself beyond what I thought possible had led to this moment. I was going to MIT. I would be the first in my family to attend such a prestigious university. My first call was to my grandmother, who screamed with joy when I told her. She had always been my biggest supporter, and I knew she would understand what this meant to me. I always knew you could do it, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Your grandfather would have been so proud. And for dinner that night, I asked my mother if we could have my favorite meal, lasagna. I wanted to make the announcement special, envisioning celebration and proud parental embraces. I carefully placed the acceptance letter in a frame I had bought with my library job money, wrapping it in tissue paper to present to them. When everyone was seated at dinner, I couldn't contain my excitement any longer. I have some news, I said, my voice quivering slightly. I heard from MIT today. My mother paused fork midway to her mouth. My father looked up from his plate. Aaron continued eating, barely interested. I got in, I announced, pulling out the framed letter. Full acceptance to the engineering program. There was a moment of silence before my mother said, That's wonderful, honey, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Congratulations, my father added, but immediately followed with, But we need to talk about the financial aspects of this. The celebration I had imagined deflated instantly. There were no hugs, no proud exclamations, no calls to relatives to share the news. Instead, my father cleared his throat and launched into what felt like a prepared speech. MIT is extremely expensive, he began, and we need to be realistic about what we can afford. I know, I said, still trying to hold on to the joy of my accomplishment. I'm planning to apply for scholarships and financial aid. I've already researched several options. Chelsea, my mother interjected gently. What your father is trying to say is that we don't have a college fund for you, not for a school that expensive. The words hit me like a physical blow. No college fund. How was that possible? My parents weren't wealthy, but they were comfortable. My father was an accountant, my mother a nurse supervisor. We lived in a nice house in a good neighborhood. The possibility they hadn't saved anything for my education had never occurred to me. But I've always talked about going to a good university, I said, confusion clouding my initial excitement. I've been working toward this my whole life. We know you've worked hard. my father said, but our household budget is tight right now. We have the mortgage, car payments, and other expenses coming up. What other expenses? I asked, a knot forming in my stomach. My parents exchanged glances. Just general family needs, my mother said vaguely. The discussion that followed was devastating. They explained that they could maybe help with books if I chose a state school, but MIT was out of the question unless I wanted to take out massive loans. They suggested community college for 2 years, then transferring to save money. Each suggestion felt like another door closing on my dream. But this is MIT, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. This is everything I've worked for. Sometimes in life we have to be practical, my father responded. Getting into MIT is a great achievement, but it doesn't mean you have to go there. I excused myself from dinner, the framed acceptance letter clutched in my hands. In my room, I pulled out my laptop and began researching every scholarship and financial aid option available. I stayed up until 3 in the morning making spreadsheets of application deadlines and award amounts, calculating how much I would need to work during school to make up the difference. Every scenario ended with the same conclusion: without any parental support, the numbers simply didn't add up. The next day, I met with Ms. Fernandez, my guidance counselor, hoping she might have solutions I hadn't thought of. This happens more often than you'd think, she said sympathetically after I explained my situation. Parents who make too much for full financial aid but not enough, or not willing to contribute significantly to education costs. What do students do? I asked. Some take on massive debt. Others choose different schools. It's a personal decision about what financial burden you're willing to accept for your future. I spent the next week in a fog, going through the motions at school, while my mind constantly calculated and recalculated different financial scenarios. I called my grandmother, who offered to help with what she could from her retirement savings, but it wasn't nearly enough. I even considered taking a gap year to work full-time, but the math still didn't work out. Then came the discovery that shattered everything. 2 weeks after my acceptance, I came home early from school because of a teacher development day. As I approached our house, I heard music blasting from the garage. Curious, I went to investigate and found Aaron setting up what looked like professional DJ equipment. Turntables, speakers, mixing boards, and a new laptop were spread across the garage. "What's all this?" I asked. Aaron grinned proudly. "My new DJ setup. Mom and Dad got it for me to start my career." I felt like the air had been sucked from my lungs. "Your career. How much did all this cost?" "About $12,000, he said casually, adjusting one of the speakers. "Dad said it was an investment in my future. I'm going to be playing clubs by the end of the year, maybe even quit school and do it full time." $12,000 for DJ equipment, for my brother who had never shown commitment to anything for more than a few months, while my MIT dream was dying because of lack of funds. I walked into the house in a daze, finding my parents in the kitchen discussing dinner plans as if nothing world-shattering had occurred. "You bought Aaron $12,000 of DJ equipment?" I asked without preamble. They looked startled, then defensive. "That's different," my father said. "That's a business investment." "A business investment?" I repeated, my voice rising. "And my education isn't an investment." "Of course it is," my mother placated. "But Aaron has different needs. He's found something he's passionate about. And I haven't. I've been passionate about engineering since I was 7 years old." "It's not the same, Ma," my father insisted. "This could be Aaron's career, and frankly, boys have a harder time finding their way without practical support." There it was, the gender bias laid bare. My academic achievements, my consistent dedication, my clear career path meant less than my brother's latest hobby because he was male and perceived as needing more help. "So you have no money for MIT, but you have $12,000 for DJ equipment that will probably be collecting dust in a few months, like the guitar, the skateboard ramp, and the video game development software." My father's face hardened. "That's not fair, Chelsea. We're doing what we think is best for both our children." But it wasn't best for both. It was best for one at the expense of the other. And in that moment, something inside me broke and reformed into something harder, more determined, and painfully aware of the injustice I was facing. The next day, I confronted my parents directly about the glaring disparity in how they supported their children. I had spent the night rehearsing what I wanted to say, determined to make them understand the magnitude of their unfairness. "I need to talk to you both," I said, finding them in the living room after dinner. Aaron was out testing his new equipment at a friend's house. "What is it, honey?" my mother asked, looking concerned at my serious tone. "I want to understand why you're willing to spend $12,000 on Aaron's DJ equipment but claim you can't help me with MIT tuition. I've calculated the numbers, and if you can afford that equipment, you could help me with at least part of my education." My father immediately became defensive. "They're completely different situations, Chelsea. Aaron's equipment is a one-time business expense with potential return on investment. Your tuition would be a 4-year commitment with no guaranteed outcome." "No guaranteed outcome," I repeated, incredulous. "I've maintained a perfect GPA while taking the hardest classes offered. I've won national competitions. I got into MIT. How is that not a guaranteed outcome?" "That's not what I meant," my father backpedaled. "Of course you're smart and accomplished, but even with a degree from MIT, you'd still need to find a job, build a career. And Aaron becoming a famous DJ after 3 months of practice is more guaranteed," my mother interjected. "Chelsea, you have to understand that you've always been so capable. You would find success no matter where you went to college. Aaron needs more direct support to find his way." That statement cut deeper than anything else. My capability, my independence, my strength were being used against me. Because I had proven myself responsible, I was deemed unworthy of support. Because Aaron had consistently shown lack of commitment and follow through, he received more resources. "So I'm being punished for being responsible," I said quietly. "Nobody is punishing you," my father insisted. "We're just making decisions based on our family budget and each of your needs. My need to attend the best engineering program in the country matters less than Aaron's need for expensive equipment for a hobby he just started." The conversation escalated. My father accused me of being dramatic. My mother tried to placate everyone without addressing the core issue. And then Aaron came home, catching the tail end of the argument. "What's going on?" he asked, looking between all of us. "Your sister is upset about the money we spent on your DJ equipment," my father explained. Aaron looked at me with a smug expression that made my blood boil. "You're just jealous because I found my calling. Not everyone needs some fancy college degree to be successful." "Your calling. Last month, your calling was video game design. Before that, it was songwriting. How long will DJing be your calling before you move on to the next thing?" "That's enough, Chelsea," my father warned. "Aaron has natural talent. Sometimes that takes time to find the right outlet. And my natural talent and hard work mean nothing." "You're being ungrateful," Aaron shot back. "Mom and Dad have supported you plenty." The word ungrateful was the final straw. After years of working twice as hard for half the recognition, after saving my own money, after sacrificing social events for academic excellence, being called ungrateful was too much to bear. "I'm not ungrateful," I said, my voice steady despite the tears threatening to fall. "I'm disappointed. I thought family meant supporting each other's dreams equally." I walked out of the room, leaving my family in stunned silence. In my bedroom, I made the hardest decision of my young life. I would decline MIT's offer. The numbers simply didn't work without parental support, and I couldn't justify starting my adult life with crushing debt. The email I wrote to MIT's admissions office was the hardest thing I'd ever written. With tears streaming down my face, I explained that due to financial constraints, I would not be able to accept their offer. I thanked them for the opportunity and expressed hope that perhaps our paths would cross again in the future. After sending it, I called my grandmother, who listened as I sobbed into the phone. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart," she said. "If I had the money, I'd pay for all of it." "I know, Grandma, it's not your responsibility." "It shouldn't have been all on you either," she said firmly. "But listen to me, Chelsea. This isn't the end of your dream. It's a detour. The strongest people I know had to take detours." Her words gave me a small measure of comfort, but graduation day still felt hollow. As I walked across the stage as valedictorian, accepting my diploma to enthusiastic applause, all I could think about was the MIT acceptance letter now tucked away in a drawer instead of proudly framed on a wall. After graduation, I made another difficult decision. I accepted a scholarship to the State University's engineering program, which covered about 60% of my tuition. It wasn't MIT, but it had a solid reputation and would allow me to pursue my degree without insurmountable debt. I also decided to move out of my parents' house immediately. I couldn't continue living in an environment where the inequality was so blatant and unapologetic. Using savings from my library job and some graduation money from relatives, I found a small apartment with 2 roommates near campus. It was cramped and far from luxurious, but it was mine free from the constant reminder of what I had lost. To cover my remaining tuition and living expenses, I took on multiple jobs. I worked 20 hours a week at the university library, another 10 at a local coffee shop, and picked up tutoring gigs whenever possible. My schedule was exhausting, often leaving me with barely enough time to sleep, let alone enjoy typical college experiences. While other freshmen were attending parties and football games, I was shelving books or serving lattes or explaining calculus concepts to struggling students. The first semester was particularly brutal, with many nights spent questioning if I had made the right choice. Would the crushing debt of MIT have been worth it to avoid this constant struggle? But gradually, I found my footing. I became more efficient with my time, learning to study between customers at the coffee shop and write papers during slow periods at the library. I found affordable ways to eat and mastered the art of textbook sharing to save money. Sometimes I skipped meals to afford necessary lab materials, but I never missed an assignment or failed a test. Perhaps most importantly, I began making connections with professors who recognized my potential despite my attendance at a less prestigious institution. Dr. Watkins, a female engineering professor, became a particularly important mentor. When she learned about my situation, she offered me a research assistant position that paid better than my other jobs and provided valuable experience in my field. "You remind me of myself at your age," she told me one day as we calibrated laboratory equipment. I also had to find my own way through college without family support, but look at me now, tenured, published, respected in my field. Her words gave me hope that my detour might lead somewhere worthwhile after all. By the end of freshman year, I had established myself as one of the top students in the engineering program and secured a competitive summer internship that would further strengthen my resume. I was building a new path one step at a time through sheer determination and grit. As I watched my roommates receive care packages and financial support from their parents, I sometimes felt the sting of abandonment. But I also felt a growing pride in my independence. Every bill I paid, every A I earned, every professional connection I made was entirely my own achievement. No one could claim credit for my success but me. That realization became my source of strength through the challenging years ahead. When things got difficult, I would remind myself, if I could overcome this level of adversity at the beginning of my journey, there was nothing in my future I couldn't handle. The unfairness I experienced wasn't going to define me, it was going to fuel me. My college years continued to be defined by determination and sacrifice. While my peers often complained about early morning classes or difficult assignments, I maintained perspective through my grueling schedule. Working 30 hours a week while carrying a full course load taught me efficiency and focus that many of my classmates lacked. By junior year, I had established a reputation among faculty as an exceptional student. Professors began approaching me about special projects and research opportunities, impressed by my work ethic and analytical abilities. Dr. Watkins continued to be my strongest advocate, connecting me with industry contacts and encouraging me to publish research papers alongside her. "You have the potential to go beyond what even MIT could have offered," she told me during a late-night lab session. Sometimes the harder path creates stronger engineers. And for my senior thesis, I developed an innovative approach to sustainable energy storage using readily available materials, a continuation of interests I'd had since childhood. The project caught the attention of the engineering department chair, who nominated it for the university's Innovation Award. When I won beating out graduate students and doctoral candidates, it felt like validation of my unconventional journey. The awards ceremony was attended by industry representatives, including several from prominent engineering firms. After receiving my award, I was approached by a woman in a crisp business suit who introduced herself as the recruiting director for Westlake Engineering Solutions. "Your project shows exactly the kind of creative problem solving we look for," she said, handing me her card. "We'd like to discuss opportunities with you when you graduate." And I graduated summa cum laude, giving a commencement address that tactfully never mentioned my detour from MIT, but emphasized persistence and self-reliance. My parents attended the ceremony, showing what felt like genuine pride for the first time in years. Even Aaron, whose DJ career had quickly fizzled, seemed impressed by my achievements. None of them knew the full extent of my struggles or sacrifices, and I chose not to elaborate. After graduation, I accepted a position at Westlake Engineering, turning down two other competitive offers. The starting salary was substantial enough that I created an aggressive plan to pay off my student loans within 5 years instead of the standard 10. I continued living with roommates, maintained a frugal budget, and devoted any bonuses or raises directly to loan repayment. My career advancement came quickly. While some colleagues from prestigious universities relied on their alma mater's reputations, I had learned to let my work speak for itself. I volunteered for challenging projects, worked additional hours to master new skills, and built relationships throughout the company. Within 3 years, I was promoted to team lead, managing engineers with more experience but less initiative. By 25, I had submitted my first patent application for an energy-efficient component I developed. By 26, I had paid off my student loans completely 5 years ahead of schedule. By 28, I had been recruited by an even more prestigious firm in another state, requiring a cross-country move that further distanced me from my family. During these years of professional growth, my contact with my parents and brother remained limited and superficial. We exchanged occasional phone calls on holidays and birthdays, carefully avoiding any topics of substance. They never visited my new city, and I returned home only for brief obligatory appearances at major family events. Each visit was a painful reminder of the support I never received, especially as I observed my parents continuing to subsidize Aaron's living expenses well into his 20s as he bounced between various entrepreneurial ventures, none of which generated significant income. My grandmother remained my strongest family connection. Though her health began declining, we spoke weekly, and I flew her out to visit me twice a year. During these visits, she would marvel at my accomplishments and the life I had built for myself. "Your grandfather always said adversity reveals character," she told me during one visit. "You've revealed yourself to be extraordinary." As my career flourished, I found myself increasingly drawn to helping others overcome similar barriers. I established a small scholarship for girls pursuing STEM education, with limited family support, funding it entirely from my own salary. I began mentoring young women engineers in my company, helping them navigate the challenges of a male-dominated field. I also started speaking at conferences about gender bias in education and career development. At one such event, a reporter from a national technology magazine interviewed me about my work and background. The resulting profile, titled "Engineering Success Against the Odds," led to more speaking engagements and a widening circle of professional influence. It was at one of these speaking engagements that I met William, an environmental scientist whose work complemented my own engineering focus. Our connection was immediate and based on mutual respect for each other's accomplishments and values. Unlike previous relationships that had floundered due to partners feeling threatened by my ambition, William celebrated my success and shared my passion for meaningful work. As our relationship deepened, I gradually shared the full story of my family's betrayal and the difficult path I had navigated as a result. William listened without judgment, but with genuine outrage on my behalf. "You deserved better," he said simply, "but look at the extraordinary person you've become because you had to fight for everything." With William's encouragement, I began working with a therapist to process the lingering pain from my family's treatment. Through therapy, I came to understand that my parents' actions reflected their own limitations rather than my worth. Their inability to see and support my potential wasn't a reflection of what I deserved, but of what they could comprehend and provide. This realization didn't erase the hurt, but it helped me contextualize it. I stopped expecting the validation from my family that had never come, and instead focused on the chosen family. I was building people who valued me for exactly who I was. By my early 30s, I had achieved what many would consider remarkable success. I owned my home outright, had a substantial investment portfolio, and had received multiple industry awards for innovation. I had built a life of financial security and professional respect through my own efforts, despite the early disadvantages I had faced. What I didn't realize was that my family had been watching this success from afar, forming their own narrative about my journey. A narrative that would soon collide with my carefully constructed independence in ways I never anticipated. The call came on a Sunday evening in early April, 7 years after my college graduation. William and I had just returned from a weekend hiking trip and were unpacking when my phone displayed my mother's name. We spoke perhaps once a month, usually brief surface-level conversations that carefully avoided any topics of substance. "Should I give you some privacy?" William asked, noticing my hesitation. "No need," I replied, answering the call on speaker. "Hi, Mom. How are you? Chelsea, honey." My mother's voice sounded strained, emotional, in a way I rarely heard. "I'm glad I caught you. How are you doing?" "I'm fine. Just got back from hiking in the mountains. Is everything okay?" "You sound upset." There was a pause, and I heard her take a deep breath. "Actually, no. Things aren't okay. Your father and I are in a difficult situation, and we need to talk to you about it." My stomach tightened. Over the years, I had imagined this call might come eventually, though I wasn't sure what form it would take. "What's going on?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "It's complicated. Your father made some investment decisions that didn't work out. Then, I had that health scare last year. The doctors found a benign tumor, but the medical bills were substantial even with insurance. And then Aaron moved back home after his music production company folded." Each revelation felt like another piece of a predictable puzzle falling into place. I had seen Aaron's latest venture promoted on social media the previous year, a company promising to discover and develop new musical talent. Like his DJ career and several enterprises in between, it had apparently collapsed. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said carefully. "That sounds stressful." "It's more than stressful, Chelsea. We're 3 months behind on the mortgage. The bank is threatening foreclosure within 60 days if we can't catch up and start making regular payments again." William's eyes met mine across the room, his expression concerned but unsurprised. We had discussed this possibility before, the likelihood that my parents' financial decisions would eventually catch up with them. "That sounds serious," I acknowledged, still not offering anything beyond sympathy. "Have you spoken with a financial advisor?" "We don't need a financial advisor," my mother said, a hint of frustration entering her voice. "We need help, Chelsea. Substantial help." "What kind of help are you looking for exactly?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "We need about $78,000. She said, the specific number indicating they had calculated precisely what they needed. "That would cover the mortgage back payments, the remaining medical bills, and clear the credit card debt your father accumulated trying to keep everything afloat." The amount was substantial, but not impossible for me. After years of careful saving and investing, I had built significant financial security. But the request stirred a complex mix of emotions I had spent years processing in therapy. "That's a large sum," I said neutrally. "Have you explored other options? Home refinancing, debt consolidation?" "Of course we have," my mother replied, sounding hurt that I would question them. "We wouldn't ask if we had any other choice. But we know you've done well for yourself. Your father always said you would be successful." The irony of that statement wasn't lost on me. My father had indeed predicted my success, just not when it mattered most, when I needed his support to attend MIT. Now that I had achieved success despite his lack of faith, he was ready to claim he had believed in me all along. "Can I speak with Dad?" I asked. There was shuffling on the other end of the line, and then my father's voice came through. "Chelsea, I know this is a lot to ask, but we're in a desperate situation here." "I understand that," I said, but I'm trying to understand how things got to this point. The house should be mostly paid off by now. You and Mom both had good jobs with retirement plans. The market hasn't been kind to our investments, he said defensively, and we've had to help Aaron out several times over the years. Of course they had. While I had been working multiple jobs to put myself through college, they had continued to fund my brother's series of failed ventures. I see, I said simply. And where is Aaron in all this? Is he contributing to the household expenses while living with you? He's between opportunities right now, my father said, using the euphemism for unemployment. But he's been helping around the house and looking after your mother since her health issues. After ending the call with a promise to think about their request, I sat in stunned silence. William waited patiently for me to process before speaking. That was exactly what you predicted might happen someday, he observed. Yes, but I didn't expect the amount to be so large or the situation so dire, I admitted. Part of me wants to help them because they're my parents, but another part feels like this is a continuation of the same pattern from my whole life. You mean them expecting you to fix everything while not holding Aaron to the same standard? Exactly, and using guilt and family obligation to manipulate me. That night I slept poorly, my mind replaying both the recent call and the painful memory of being denied support for MIT. The following day I called my therapist and scheduled an emergency session to discuss the situation. This is triggering all your old wounds, she observed after I explained the situation. But you're not that powerless teenager anymore. You have choices now. What's the right choice? I asked. If I help them, I feel like I'm enabling the same dysfunctional patterns. If I don't, I feel guilty for having the means to help but choosing not to. There isn't a single right answer, she replied. But there are healthy and unhealthy ways to approach this. The question isn't just whether to help, but how to help in a way that respects your boundaries and doesn't perpetuate harmful dynamics. I spent the next week carefully considering my options. I spoke with William at length, consulted with a financial advisor about the implications of such a large gift, and reached out to trusted friends who had witnessed my struggle over the years. I also calculated exactly what I could afford to give without compromising my own financial security and future goals. I made lists of pros and cons, examined my true motivations for helping or not helping, and tried to envision how I would feel about my decision years into the future. Would I regret helping? Would I regret not helping? Which regret could I better live with? Through this deliberate process, I came to understand that my decision wasn't really about money at all. It was about establishing healthy boundaries that had never existed in my family. It was about acknowledging the past without letting it dictate my future. And most importantly, it was about making choices based on my values rather than obligation or guilt. After a week of careful consideration, I scheduled a video call with my parents, requesting that Aaron be present as well since he was part of the family financial situation. I had made my decision, and now I needed to communicate it clearly and compassionately. The video call connected at 7 p.m. on a Wednesday evening, revealing my parents sitting tensely at their kitchen table with Aaron slouched in a chair beside them. I had prepared thoroughly for this conversation, writing out key points I wanted to address and practicing with William to ensure I remained calm and clear. Thank you all for making time for this call. I began, my voice steady and professional. Before we discuss your financial situation, I want to establish some ground rules for our conversation. I'd like to speak without interruption first, and then you'll have the opportunity to respond. Is that agreeable? My parents nodded, looking slightly taken aback by my businesslike approach. Aaron rolled his eyes but remained silent. I've given your request a lot of thought, I continued. To make an informed decision, I need to consider not just your current situation, but also our history as a family. I took a deep breath and proceeded to calmly recount the MIT situation from 8 years earlier. I described receiving my acceptance letter, my excitement, and then the devastating conversation where my parents claimed they couldn't help financially. I detailed my desperate attempts to make it work through scholarships and loans and the heartbreaking decision to decline the offer. 2 weeks after that conversation, I continued, I discovered that you had given Aaron $12,000 for DJ equipment. At the time, you explained this as a business investment rather than education. This was particularly painful because it revealed that the issue wasn't a lack of funds, but rather a choice about how to allocate those funds. My father shifted uncomfortably. My mother looked down at the table. Erin's expression darkened. Over the years, I continued, there has been a pattern of financial support for Erin that was never extended to me. From what you've told me, you've continued to support his various business ventures, none of which have proven sustainable. That's not fair, Erin interjected. You've always been the golden child with your perfect grades and awards. Please let me finish, I said firmly. This isn't about academic achievement. It's about tangible financial support. While I worked multiple jobs to put myself through college, lived with roommates to save money, and paid off my student loans through careful budgeting, you received continued financial assistance well into adulthood. I proceeded to outline my own journey after college, the effort required to build my career and financial stability without family support. I was careful to state facts without bitterness or accusation, but I didn't soften the reality of what I had experienced. I'm not sharing this to make anyone feel guilty, I explained. I'm sharing it because it's crucial context for my decision regarding your current request. My parents looked increasingly uncomfortable while Erin had crossed his arms defensively. After careful consideration, I said, I've decided that I will not be providing the $78,000 you've requested. The reaction was immediate. My mother's eyes filled with tears. My father's face hardened with anger. Erin scoffed loudly. I knew it, he muttered. So much for family loyalty. If you let me finish, I said calmly, I have an alternative proposal. This caught their attention and they fell silent again. While I won't simply write a check for the full amount, I am willing to help in other ways. First, I can connect you with a financial advisor who specializes in situations like yours. I would cover the cost of their services. Second, I would be willing to help you develop a realistic budget and debt repayment plan. Third, I could potentially provide a smaller amount, perhaps $10,000 as emergency assistance, while you implement longer-term solutions. 10,000, my father repeated incredulously. That's barely enough to cover 1 month's back payments. It would be a stopgap measure while you address the underlying issues, I explained. The real solution involves making different financial choices going forward. What choices? My mother asked tearfully. We don't have choices right now. We're about to lose our home. There are always choices, I replied gently. You could sell the house and downsize to something more affordable. Erin could get a stable job, any job to contribute to household expenses. You could negotiate with creditors for reduced payments. So you're just going to let us become homeless? Erin accused. After all Mom and Dad did for you growing up. No one is becoming homeless, I said firmly. There are options between getting a $78,000 bailout and homelessness. My father leaned forward, his expression shifting from anger to manipulation. Chelsea, I know we weren't perfect parents, but we gave you a good home, food, clothing, all the basics you needed to become who you are today. Doesn't that count for anything? Of course it counts, I acknowledged, and I appreciate those things. But providing the basics for your child isn't extraordinary. It's the minimum expectation of parenthood. What I'm talking about goes beyond that. It's about the different standards that were applied to Erin and me, the different levels of support we received at critical junctures. You're just bitter about MIT, my mother accused. You've been successful anyway. You didn't need MIT. This isn't about MIT specifically, I clarified. It's about a pattern of behavior that MIT exemplified. And while I have been successful, that success came at a much higher cost to me personally than it needed to. The conversation continued to deteriorate, with my parents alternating between guilt trips, anger, and appeals to family obligation. Erin occasionally interjected with accusations about my character and motives. I think we need to take a step back, I finally said after nearly an hour of circular arguments. You asked for my help, and I've explained the kind of help I'm willing to provide. If you're interested in the financial planning assistance and smaller emergency fund I've offered, I'm here for that. If you're only interested in the full amount with no conditions or changes on your part, then I can't help you. "So that's it," my father demanded. "Take it or leave it." "Those are the boundaries I'm setting," I confirmed. "I'm sorry if that's disappointing, but I've made my decision after careful consideration." As the call became increasingly unproductive, with my mother crying and my father making bitter comments about ingratitude, I calmly ended the conversation. "I can see we're not making progress right now. Let's all take some time to process this. If you decide you want to explore the options I've suggested, you can let me know. I love you all, but I need to go now." And I disconnected the call before they could respond, then sat in silence processing the intense emotional exchange. William, who had been sitting quietly off camera, came over and put his arm around me. "You handled that with incredible grace," he said. "Are you okay?" "I think so," I replied, surprised to find I felt more relieved than upset. It was hard, but it felt right. For the first time, I stood up for myself with them without apologizing or backing down. The aftermath was immediate and intense. Within an hour, I had received multiple text messages from both parents, ranging from guilt-inducing, "I guess your success means more to you than family," to openly angry, "After all we sacrificed for you." Aaron left a particularly vitriolic voicemail accusing me of enjoying their suffering and always thinking I was better than everyone else. I didn't respond to any of these messages, following my therapist's advice to give everyone time to process their emotions before engaging further. The barrage continued for several days eventually, including messages from aunts and uncles who had clearly been given a one-sided account of the situation. "Do you regret your decision?" William asked a week later, after a particularly nasty email from my father. "No," I said with surprising certainty. "I regret that it hurts them, but I don't regret setting this boundary. It was long overdue." The immediate backlash was painful, but also clarifying. It confirmed that my family's view of me had always been as a resource rather than as a person with legitimate needs and feelings of my own. By refusing to be that resource, I had disrupted their expectations and forced a reckoning that was uncomfortable for everyone, but necessary for any chance at healthier relationships in the future. As difficult as the estrangement was, it also brought an unexpected sense of freedom. For the first time, I had fully acknowledged the reality of my family dynamics and made choices based on that reality rather than on hope or obligation. It wasn't the outcome I would have chosen in an ideal world, but it was honest, and there was peace in that honesty. The weeks following my refusal to pay my parents' mortgage were some of the most emotionally challenging of my adult life. The initial angry messages eventually gave way to silence, a complete communication blackout that felt both relieving and deeply sad. For the first time since childhood, I experienced extended periods without any contact from my family. The holiday season was particularly difficult. Thanksgiving approached, and for the first time there was no awkward invitation from my parents, no obligatory discussion about whether I would attend family dinner. Christmas followed with the same silence. I sent cards that received no acknowledgement, gifts that elicited no thanks. The complete cutoff was their choice, their way of punishing my boundary setting. "Are you okay?" William asked as we decorated our own tree, creating new traditions together. "Not entirely," I admitted, "but I'm better than I expected to be. There's grief, but also a strange sense of clarity." I had begun attending a support group for adults with difficult family relationships, finding solace in stories similar to mine. People from various backgrounds shared experiences of favoritism, financial exploitation, and the complicated process of establishing boundaries with family. Their stories helped normalize my own experience and provided perspective on the grieving process that inevitably followed setting significant boundaries. "It's like mourning the family you deserved but never had," one group member explained during a session. "You're not just dealing with the current estrangement, but with the recognition of what was missing all along." This framing helped me understand the layers of my emotional response. I wasn't just sad about the current situation, I was finally fully acknowledging and processing the lifetime of inequitable treatment that had preceded it. This was necessary grief long deferred and now finally being experienced. During this period of estrangement, I threw myself into work and community involvement. I expanded my scholarship program for young women in STEM, finding healing and helping others avoid the barriers I had faced. I accepted a promotion to an executive position at my company, taking on greater responsibilities that required all my focus and energy. Perhaps most meaningful was an invitation to give a TEDx talk about women in engineering and the often invisible barriers they face, including family dynamics that prioritize male success. Without naming my family directly, I was able to share aspects of my story that resonated deeply with audience members who had faced similar challenges. After the talk, a representative from MIT's Alumni Association approached me. "Your story really struck a chord," she said, introducing herself. "We have an initiative to reconnect with students who were accepted but unable to attend for financial reasons. Would you be interested in discussing ways you might get involved?" This unexpected connection led to a meeting with MIT administrators where I established a scholarship specifically for female students who had limited family support. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was now in a position to help others attend the school I had been forced to decline. There was both pain and purpose in this full circle moment. About 6 months into the estrangement, I received an unexpected email from my grandmother. Though her health had been declining for years, making travel difficult, she requested to visit me. "There are things we need to discuss in person," she wrote. "Your parents haven't told me much about what's happening, but I sense there's more to the story." When she arrived looking frailer than I remembered, but with the same sharp intellect in her eyes, we had a heart-to-heart conversation unlike any we'd had before. I shared the full story of the mortgage request and my decision, as well as the painful history that had informed it. "I had no idea about MIT," she said, genuine shock in her voice. "They told the family you chose the state school because of a special program they offered, and I certainly didn't know about Aaron's DJ equipment." "They've been managing the family narrative for years," I replied. "I never wanted to put you in the middle or make you choose sides. You were always protecting everyone, even when you were the one who needed protection," she observed sadly. I wish I had asked more questions, pushed harder when things didn't seem right. My grandmother's visit became a turning point. Having one family member finally understand the full picture provided a validation I hadn't realized I still needed. She didn't pressure me to reconcile with my parents, but offered perspective on their limitations. "Your parents repeat patterns from their own upbringings," she explained. "Your father's parents heavily favored his sister, and your mother was expected to sacrifice for her brothers. They're doing what was done to them, as wrong as it is." This didn't excuse their behavior, but helped me contextualize it as part of a larger family pattern rather than a personal rejection. Understanding this made it easier to release some of the hurt without abandoning my boundaries. Meanwhile, practical reality was forcing changes in my parents' situation. Through mutual acquaintances, I learned they had indeed sold their house and downsized to an apartment. Aaron had finally found steady employment at a local music store rather than pursuing another entrepreneurial venture. My father had taken on part-time accounting work despite being of retirement age. These changes suggested they had found ways to address their financial crisis without my intervention. While I felt sympathy for their difficulties, I also recognized that these adaptations were long overdue and perhaps ultimately healthy for everyone involved. After nearly 2 years of minimal contact, I received a text message from my mother. "We miss you. Would you be open to talking again?" The message was simple but significant. Its tone lacked the accusation and guilt of previous communications. After discussing it with William and my therapist, I agreed to a lunch meeting at a neutral location midway between our homes. The reunion was cautious and awkward. My parents looked older, the stress of recent years evident in new lines on their faces. We started with safe topics: the weather, my recent professional accomplishments that had been featured in local news, general updates about extended family. Eventually, my father cleared his throat and said something I never expected to hear. "We've been doing a lot of thinking, Chelsea. And while we may not agree with all your perspectives, we owe you an apology for how we handled things both recently and in the past." It wasn't a complete acknowledgement of the inequity I had experienced, but it was a start. The conversation that followed wasn't perfect or comprehensive, but it opened a door to a new kind of relationship, one based on adult interaction rather than old patterns and expectations. Over the following months and years, we gradually rebuilt contact. Our new relationship had clearer boundaries and more honest communication. I never did provide the large sum they had initially requested, but as their situation stabilized and our relationship improved, I occasionally helped in smaller ways, a gift when their car needed repairs assistance with medical bills not covered by insurance. Aaron and I developed a more distant but cordial relationship. He seemed to have finally matured, taking responsibility for his own finances and even occasionally acknowledging the advantages he had received. I didn't see it then, he admitted during one family gathering, but looking back, I can see things were unbalanced. I'm sorry for how I acted when you wouldn't bail us out. This evolving family dynamic wasn't perfect, but it was healthier. I had learned that forgiveness didn't require forgetting or abandoning boundaries. It simply meant releasing the expectation that the past could have been different and accepting people as they were in the present with all their limitations. By my mid-30s, I had found peace with my family history. The MIT rejection had indeed become a catalyst for greater resilience and determination. The painful journey had forced me to develop strengths and perspectives I might never have discovered on an easier path. I now led a research division at my company, mentored dozens of young engineers, particularly women with limited family support, and had built a loving partnership with William, who had become my husband. We had created a home filled with warmth and equity, breaking the cycles of favoritism and conditional love that had marked my childhood. When I reflected on the long journey from that devastated teenager holding an MIT acceptance letter to the accomplished professional I had become, I felt not just pride, but a deep gratitude for my own persistence. The hardest moments had forged my strongest qualities. The unfair obstacles had become stepping stones to unexpected heights. The inequity I experienced wasn't fair or right, but acknowledging that truth had finally freed me from its power. In reclaiming my story and establishing healthy boundaries, I had discovered that true family isn't defined by obligation or blood, but by respect, support, and love freely given. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision about helping family financially? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more about establishing healthy boundaries and finding success despite obstacles. Remember that your worth isn't determined by others' treatment of you, but by the strength and integrity with which you navigate life's challenges. Thank you for listening, and may you find the courage to honor your own worth in all your relationships.